Hello, and welcome to another This Week in AI. Welcome to stage, my colleague Danilo. How you doing, Danilo?
Hey Ben, I'm good. Hopefully everything working. No glitches.
I know, right? It's like, how many AI people does it take to to set up a live stream? More than two, apparently. But hey, here we are.
Yeah,
Hopefully another week where we've not mucked it up last minute. But yeah, all is possible. Been an interesting week. We missed one thing from last week as well, so we've got some stuff there. But again, for those joining us for the first time, hi, my name's Ben. I'm Principal AI Engineer with ThoughtWorks. This is a show where myself and Danilo have a lot of these conversations about what's going on, what's interesting to us each week, and we thought, hey, why not just put that out live and discuss some of the things that we've seen and some of the stuff that's interested us this week in AI. Danilo, do you want to introduce yourself very briefly as well?
yeah, briefly. So yeah, work with Ben, Global VP of AI here at ThoughtWorks, and yeah, been driving a lot of our agentic AI conversations with clients. But keeping up with AI is almost like a full-time job. So I think this is a good excuse for us to do that and share with other people. So hopefully we're helping out.
Absolutely, yeah. Nice. Well, let's jump right in. So this is one of the things we sort of we missed from last week, but only just missed because it was on the 12th, and I think we shot on the 13th. But hey, so Seed Dance 2.0 from ByteDance. So again, like another great model release coming in from ByteDance and the Chinese companies. So yeah, really cool. And again, like drastically improved video generation, controllability. So this is the sort of stuff that starts to get to like a lot more useful AI generation. You know, still some artifacts here, but you can see the quality is significantly improved. Is this sped up? Feels a bit sped up. And having just been at the Olympics, I must say that is the highest jump I've ever seen. Anyone who could achieve that height in ice dancing is destined for gold. And yeah, nice that they give you the prompt that they've been doing as well. So yeah,
it does video and audio as well. And there was like a lot of demos. If you look at social media, people doing videos of like famous people, movie characters, and there's the whole IP protection discussion and what's allowed. But ByteDance, if you don't recognize, they're the company behind TikTok. So they have loads of like video, audio, right, to train the model. And yeah, it's starting to become more and more realistic. It's getting harder to detect the artifacts and like the voice, the sound. Like I saw some of the demos, like Tom Cruise fighting, and he's like, "Yeah, that sounds like him in a movie." You know, it's
pretty
too
impressive.
real.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and it's this consistency stuff that makes the difference, right? Maintaining the consistency scene to scene, and it seems like they're making big. Like prompt following, you know, motion quality, editing consistency, like making big progresses in all these areas. So like super interesting. Yeah, again, like very different view of copyright in China. I remember at university, even like one of my colleagues, one of my pals, he went to China for a year abroad, and like he was like, it's great, like you don't have to pay this like £150 for textbooks because, you know, they're not copyrighted. So as soon as someone writes it, you could just get it much more cheaply and easily, and you know, so there's advantages as well as obviously if you are Tom Cruise, significant disadvantages of this sort of thing.
Or like the studios, right? They usually own a lot of this IP, so they're gonna be the ones doing all the lawsuits. What's interesting as well, I have a user like what I was looking. This accepts not just the text prompt, but like you can actually give like reference images, or you can give like sample sounds as well as input. So like besides prompt, you could prime it with like, okay, this is kind of the style I'm going for. This image that has a reference for the thing I want to animate. Then it makes the process of producing the video a lot richer, you know. So it's not like you have to textually be able to describe everything and just do it through the prompts. So it's multiple inputs that the model can take to create these things, and yeah, quite impressive.
That's it. Yeah, that's what you want in terms of like the usage of this to make it more consistent. So it's pretty cool. I mean, we saw some really cool use cases from this stuff with one of our clients last year, where they were doing a lot of experimentation and actually building bits and pieces like this for not just marketing, but also for their actual like games and stuff like that. So this isn't just sort of I suppose a bit of fun. Like there's some real commercial uses that are really quite interesting, and like I'm sure we're not far away from. In fact, there probably are like quite a few AI movies out there, and again, like these getting better and better would be super interesting. I still think that there's a case of like this whole idea of like curating that movie is still going to be like a lot of work, even with this AI model. Like you still need to have that artistic vision, that understanding of impact, the story, how it flows, that sort of stuff. But yeah, like I would say again, it's probably again a great democratization, whereas someone who has the vision, the artistic sensibilities, but not necessarily the budget of Hollywood may end up being able to produce something super interesting. And obviously we saw last year like AI actresses and stuff like that. So yeah, like could be quite interesting to see what people start building in the future.
Yeah, so and it was released 7 days ago, so depending how we define this week, I guess we're still in time for this one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it would be within the floating window. So
within the 7-day time frame, yeah, window.
Yeah, I was going to say, if anyone in the comments feels that's unfair, then good luck to them. Cool. Now another one from Kren this time. So yeah, open weight again, open source, native multimodality. So yeah, like just another great model. Like again, looking like we're, it's just quite interesting because it's not just that you could use the same thing for coding, but you've also got like this document recognition, understanding, and video reasoning with subtitles and stuff like that. So it's quite interesting that you now would have that sort of combination of expertise in one place. And yeah, I mean, seems to be doing pretty well here in terms of like by comparison to Claude Opus 4.5, which again, already out of date.
Outdated. Yeah,
Gemini 3 Pro and GPT 5.2. But yeah, like doing better at like document recognition and understanding there already, which is super interesting because I think that's a use case that we're going to see more and more, right? Where there's large volumes of documents, currently are sort of stored diligently, but not necessarily easily usable or machine readable. And this is sort of that step along that journey. So having these multimodal models that are great at this is going to be pretty awesome.
Yeah, and like the Chinese have been on rampage lately, right? Like we talked about GLM from ZAI last week, Qwen now from Alibaba.
Yep.
DeepSeek hasn't released any model recently, but like I'm sure something might come out. ByteDance is a Chinese company as well. So so a lot of innovation coming out, and the idea of having the multimodal by default, I think that's where a lot of the boundaries are being pushed, right? Like even with like Google, not Gemini itself, but like the Genie that they released, like the world model stuff, like they're trying to put towards understanding visual moving environments, like not just language anymore. So yeah, it's quite and these are like weight models as well, right? So like it's quite big. This one is 390 something billion parameters, I guess, but like the ability that you could be able to take this and host it yourself, or like fine tune it, or just customize around it. it's quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sam's asking kind of that same question, right? It's like, from an AI novice, why is open source so good? And like, I suppose there's two lenses, right? There's the lens of the lab and there's the lens of the user. So yeah, for the user, it's way better, right? Because actually now, like, if I have any proprietary data that I have on-prem, I don't want to send it anywhere. Well, now I can deploy this model that's frontier level almost, certainly in some areas ahead of frontier, like a new frontier, and yeah, get those benefits straight away on my data, keeping everything in the right place. And I suppose from the other side, it's very much, in the lab, by driving people to these models is then able to capture some value in other ways. So, that might be through the other tooling and ecosystem that they've got. But yeah, like it may just be from like that proliferation of usage becoming something that's useful, and then like people come to them and say, hey, how do we get better things from your model? So yeah, it's a really good question, actually. I'm not certain, like, again, it tends to be when you're behind, open sourcing is a great way of like getting to sort of parity, right? Because you open source it and then people use it and then people point out all the errors, and improve it and use it and say when it's great, when it's not. But yeah, like it's certainly going back to those graphs. It seems like it's it's certainly not in coding necessarily, but in the OCR, document recognition understanding, seems to be ahead of like at least that like most recent stage of again, we'll maybe go to the next model after this, but yeah. I don't know, Janela, what are your thoughts on the sort of open source piece?
Yeah, I mean, two things I was going to mention. One is open source versus open weight. Like a lot of these models are actually open weight, so they share the weight so you can host and run the model. Like, not you don't have access to the code itself. Like a lot of open source philosophy, at least, came from you can read and inspect the code, and like anyone in the community could contribute. And like I said, find to improve. Like it accelerates the innovation and it democratizes this. True, what's close to state of the arts. That's a lot of the philosophy behind open source. But most of the lab, like if you want to do it yourself from scratch, it's probably you can read the papers. You can spend the money to try to get access to the info required to do these trainings. But like what people do is once the model is trained, then they give a weight so you can host and you can customize on top of it. But yeah, you don't get access to the code. So there's a bit of like just terminology there, open source versus open weights. And then the other thing is like, yeah, you drive competition, I guess. We talked about this last week a little bit in terms of the model race is really like a race to commoditization now, right? Like how much differentiation. These models are very head-to-head. Like they're trying to beat each other by a few percentage points on this benchmark versus the other benchmark. Having more options as a user is great because yeah, I might not need to have to pay for it if there's an open weights model that I could host, or I can optimize my cost. I guess you still pay to do inference using the model, but like yeah, I'm not just have limited choices of which provider or where these models are running that I could use.
No, I completely agree. It makes a lot of sense, and yeah, I mean, like, Dean regular has got some great questions coming in. So yeah, like looks comparable to Sonnet 4.5 for coding. Great to see. Curious to see the requirements for running this locally. And then he found the requirements with Unsloth. So yeah, again, like you said, it's huge. 800, so it's almost a terabyte on disk.
Yeah, you need a mini cluster.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Like who knows? They might do quantized version of these models as well, right? That's the thing. Either quantized or they might distill. So like you might have smaller version. Like this is what the labs do already, right? Like all of the you've got super powerful, bigger version of the model, and then you have the fast and cheaper, smaller model that maybe not as capable, but pretty good, and then faster. Because sometimes latency is actually an important thing, right? Like we'll talk a bit later about productivity, but like one of the things, if it takes a while for the model to get back to you, you fire a task or a prompt, and then the model starts thinking. We as humans will start like, okay, let me check my email, let me do something else, and like the model might have finished, and then like you spend another 5 minutes doing something else you didn't notice. Like you actually capture all the
Yeah.
productivity from what the
I mean,
model is doing.
I feel that a lot with Claude Code when it's like you've set it off on something and you get distracted, you do another thing, and like now you've got like 3 Claude sessions that you're trying to spin plates with, and you're like, you know, my context window's full. I don't know what I was doing in the third one, you know. And yeah, like again, this do we think we're going to see that evolution of smaller, more focused models that excel at individual tasks if we run locally? I think this is already happening. So I'm aware of. I need to find it, but I believe JetBrains already has this, where they're like, yeah, there you go. Oh God, just search, please. Okay, cool. Yeah, so yeah, so it's not enabled by default. But I think, yeah, like I believe they do have a local model that they're running that does this sort of stuff. So yeah, I definitely think that that's happening, and I also think it's a really useful way of doing it. And like the real problem that you have with a round trip over the internet is a number of things. One's latency, like you said, really important to have that speed of latency. So again, this is probably more with that like autocomplete on steroids view, where like latency really does matter because you're typing each character, or you know, and it's auto-completing. But then also like the data security, right? If stuff is staying on device, it's way safer than if it's going across the internet, even if it's encrypted and all that sort of stuff. Especially if it's going to third parties, which most of these services are. Yeah, like it's just a lot easier to have that sort of stuff locally. So yeah, I don't know when this is going to be like completely feasible. But you know, again, the other thing that might happen is, of course, local hardware will 10x as it does with Moore's law, and then you know what's available now and difficult, you know, needs 1 terabit of memory, and you know 256 gigabytes of 1 terabit of storage and 256 of memory. You know, that will be just baseline specs. Or the other option is, you know, the local experience just becomes kind of a terminal, and you've got a cluster that runs this stuff, and you just connect to that nicely and easily, and that's how you do your work. Kind of like the Chrome notebook type experience, right, where everything's on the cloud and you don't have to worry about, you know, having that latency locally because you've got it, you know, through a portal.
Yeah, we've seen this in other tasks as well, not just coding, like people training small language models that are smaller, faster for specific things. So I remember we're looking at, I think Galileo AI is one of the observability evals platform. They had feature of like, if you're gonna do evals, you could train a small language model that is quite fast, cheap to do the evals only, right? Like it is not actually to do that, but you assess the output quality of another thing that you're doing, and like you could do things like that. So there's definitely trend of, like you said, yeah, hardware will get more capable, but like yeah, people will want to compress models to be smaller so you can do things cheaper. Like, and it gets into the like almost like the performance engineering optimization, right? Once you build something that works, the next concern is gonna be like, oh, how can I make it cheaper or faster, right? And squeeze the most out of it, and then you start getting into this optimization. Like all of these are valid routes, and with models sprawling everywhere, it's just going to have more options to test things out.
Yeah, and yeah, just to highlight, this is 2024, right? This is when they introduced these foundation models for evals, and they were like 100 millisecond response times, I believe, like ultra low latency evaluation, ultra low cost. You know, because that's the key unlock for these evals. Is like you need them to be. So yeah, like with some customers exceeds 1 million per year in production scale of evals, and then like they were able to produce that. Like again, this is GPT 3.5, and they were doing this then.
Yeah.
Like it will only have got better, and it will only get better. So yeah, I think it's really cool in terms of that. Oh, nice. We got a collaborator of ours, Mr. Rishi. Yeah, thanks for the question. So right, you're doing an amazing job. As a novice in multimodal LLMs, are there any advancements happening in this space? Meaning, is it possible to get images, videos to sometimes be inputs to RAG pipelines? How effective are any current solutions, if any? So yeah, I think the Qwen piece is actually a really good. I mean, this is brand like hot off the press, right? This was 4 days ago. So yeah, this has got that native multimodality, and so yeah, you can for sure have this dual input into retrieval augmented generation. So I've done this with so as you know, for my book, I'm doing a lot of evaluation for trying to work out if things are hitting the mark or not, because we submit a chapter once a month, and we get a technical review like once. So there's not a lot of feedback loops, and we like shifting left. So we created an agent that reviews our diagrams. And so to that, the input is both the surrounding text and the actual image of the diagram. And then, we have a rubric that comes back and is filled out by the LLM with retrieval augmented generation to sort of say, is this good? Is this useful? Is it supported by the text? Could we improve it? How could we improve it? That sort of thing. And, we can ignore many of the results, but yeah, we can also have a look at them and see if they're any good and do that sort of thing. So, I don't know, I've not actually deployed any of that with a client, so I wouldn't say how well it's working at scale, but locally I found it very useful. I don't know, whether we have any customers who are using that in a scaled manner. That's pretty cutting edge stuff, I think.
Yeah, but it's definitely advancements, right? One other thing, if you look at the announcement, it's 1 million context window as well. So especially for multimodal stuff, the input's gonna be bigger, right? If you're trying to, there's a lot more information richness if you're looking at an image or a video as a series of images. So being able to add more into the context window, you can probably qualify more signal for the model to perform better. So yeah, it's an interesting space to watch.
Yeah, so this is interesting in the way that they've trained it. So they've decoupled the parallelism strategy across vision and language. So rather than going just pure, so it's basically they're training mixed text and image video at a equivalent baseline to pure text, as opposed to the previous generation of mixed text and image sort of pieces going in. So yeah, it's super interesting how this stuff is this. Yeah, again, there's a whole huge amount of information going on with how you get that data and represent it nicely for to be machine readable. I mean, there's the image and video processing is for me, at least from the outside, maybe a dark science that I'm not very good at. But yeah, there's huge amounts of interest. We actually did this in one of our katas. We do weekly AI agent katas, and we did this for evaluating text to speech and seeing whether you passed the speech in and you had a set of criteria, and then we were comparing the different speech pieces produced, see if they matched and stuff like that. So quite cool. So yeah, I mean, look, a lot of stuff here that is kind of wild that you can get all of this. Again, it seems obligatory to add a video game to code. Intelligent driving use case, pretty cool. Yeah. Edinburgh. Oh wow. Is a telephone booth on that? Yeah.
Asking visual questions from, I saw that demo.
I haven't seen this one, but yeah, so really cool. Yeah, thanks for the question, Rishi, and yeah, now get back to work, I suppose. Not at all. Rishi's done a great job this week. He's been smashing it. So, and we're doing this, so it is work, right?
Yes.
Cool. And from Dean, I've been using OpenSpec. Feels like a frontier model is needed when defining proposal spec design tasks, but there may be room for a robust local model to implement, maybe. Yeah, I agree. And you see this again with Claude Code setups and other things like that. People are using like frontier models for coordination and like verification and understanding. You kind of want to go there, but like then you can go down a level to like a less intelligent model because you've broken down that task into smaller chunks. And actually, like, if I'm honest, I think there's a lot more progress to go down even a step further and like just say like, okay, lots of this should be templating, and we should be thinking about like, can we not just turn these into templates? For example, when you ask Claude Code to do a refactor at the moment, it doesn't use deterministic refactoring, right? It goes and edits all the files, and you're like, right, well, like that's not how I work in an IDE. If I go to if I want to rename a class, I will just use the rename LSP functionality and rename it everywhere and not have to worry as much. Maybe there's a couple of mocks that I need to fix. I'm not a big fan of mocks anyway, but like that's always what seems to break if you do that sort of refactoring. And yeah, you have to go and fix those. But yeah, like that would actually get you like 90% of the way with deterministic stuff. And then, again, you only need a model that's clever enough to be like, okay, cool. Like, let me find that thing. Let me use the LSP rename. Okay, good. Done. Like that's like 90. Okay, cool. This test failed. Let me go fix that test. and you're kind of good. So I definitely think that that's going to be happening. I've not used OpenSpec myself. I'm a little bit, I don't want to offend anyone, but like I'm a little bit out on spec driven development. I feel like it's why move from deterministic validation of completeness to like markdown. I would rather just write some tests that do that, and I've done that with migrations. Like I'll write a test for like I want to see this happen. Okay, cool, here's the test. I'll collaborate with Claude on it, and then like, okay, cool, now make the test pass. And that seems to, for me, be a little bit easier than like trying to get it perfect in Markdown. But yeah, I definitely think that there's an iterative piece there, and I think the spec driven kind of locks you into a bit more of a waterfall mentality. But I mean, they're getting results, so I don't want to be too out on it. Because
I mean, this is one area of active experimentation, right? Like, I don't think we settle as an industry, like, what's the right way to do it. We had a big debate about, I mean, spec was a bunch of topics that came up in that retreat about the future of software, which we published. Actually, Martin Fowler have been publishing fragments for like insights of stuff that we talked about. But ThoughtWorks had, we did a report now from the, if you read his latest fragment from yesterday. I don't know how you find it from here. Yeah.
There you go.
There's a detailed summary of thoughts. So that link in the. This is a summary of a bunch of the topics that came up, and you'll see like also had a lot of conversation about spec. How, like, what does it mean is even confusing at the moment. Like what people mean by spec, and like how do you manage the spec, and whether you use spec as the source of truth and then you treat the code as throwaway, or like spec anchored, which is the term that Brigitte coined of like, well, actually, you've got some spec in text, and then you've got the code together in context to help the agent do the work. Or it's like spec first. You only look at the spec, you don't even look at the code. So there's different positions, and like we talked about, like what you're specing is lots of different things as well. Some people are codifying like you said, the practice, the ways of working, or like how the agent should write code, or how to assess whether they should write tests or not. We're trying to codify like architecture decisions for the design of the system, which is like maybe something that you need to persist and like record the ADR, so you have a history of like, yeah, this is why this decision was made. Like that's interesting context that not necessarily the code's gonna tell you, because it's gonna have the latest version. Like, so like there is a combination of like what's useful to be considered as spec, and like functional requirements of trying to build, I guess, is a spec as well. But like that gets codified to the actual system once it's done. So there's a lot of debate, I guess, of like, what does it mean? How far does it go? And like, how should we manage that? And yeah, OpenSpec is one tool that's trying to support this kind of stuff. But like this space is one that I think is gonna keep evolving. I had a chat with a colleague the other day, where he was like, he didn't care about distinction because he was like, oh, when I'm giving the agent something, it's just a bunch of tokens, like the tokens I'm putting into the context window, whether it's coming from the code, whether it's coming from the spec. Like at the end of the day, we're just sending context to the model to do what we need to do. And he's a lot more what you were saying actually, about building a bunch of linters and like tests or like deterministic stuff to keep the age in line, I guess. Like how much validation, verification could we codify around so we actually have a safety net, I guess, that the agent not going off track and do a bunch of other stuff. And yeah, he was less worried about how to define the terms and whether it's from the spec or from the code. He was more interested in the how do we check that whatever comes out is actually working and like doing what I expected to do, which is another take on this.
Yeah, I think I fall much more on that side, and again, like read Birgitta's article, they're amazing. But yeah, like she talks around that, like, are we reinventing BDD? Are we reinventing MDD, model-driven development, where we're basically creating all these bits and pieces? Where it's like, and for me, I quite like that idea of the like, rather than it being a spec in Markdown, and it's more like a DSL, a domain-specific language that you've created that's executable, that kind of makes sense in that domain. And then, yeah, to your point on the like harness piece, like, so I didn't realize it was being called harness engineering. Kind of makes sense. I still think of it as just like tests and linters, like, you know.
But like we talk about like architecture fitness functions, right? Like when we talk about like, oh, it's a way to define whether the system is closer to the expected design that we want. And like if you read the evolutionary architecture book, that concept exists. That's the kind of stuff we're kind of codifying now, right? It's like, yeah, you call maybe it's a test, but it's an executable thing that can give me a sign whether did I get closer or not to the intended design. It's one way to manage that. But yeah, harness engineering is making so the terms are not settled yet, and like people are debating. Like obviously that was a topic that came up as well because Martin Fowler was there and he wrote the book on DSL. And if you remember at the time, I don't know how many people, this is gonna age me now, but like back then, one of the things we're talking about was like the idea of language workbenches. Like you define these models, you know, at the time was like trying to make more visual, I guess, but like that was a model that would represent the concepts and the things that you're trying to build. And then these language workbenches could create projections of that model into executable code or something like that. And we were talking about in the retreats the idea of like, oh, at some point maybe, who knows, like there's going to be a programming language that executes stuff that's optimized for token cost reduction that is not readable by humans anymore. We're going to be feeding context into it, but like somehow we might be able to get like, or project this, like explain to me something like this, and then it could create like a visual diagram that we can interpret, or even obviously ask human natural language questions that it could explain. Who knows where we're going to land? Like it's a great time to be alive. I think we're reinventing the fashion way. Like Martin was saying, like he posted a video yesterday on the LinkedIn channel from Thor's that this feels like early 90s, where people were exploring these ideas of like object-oriented design and like different programming languages. And the Agile Manifesto came up about like 10 years later, once people had been doing it. But like that's the stage we're at with this. But maybe it won't take 10 years because we're moving 10x fast now. But there's so much experimentation happening now. It's more like being curious, I guess, is an important skill these days, and keep yourself in that learning mindset, right? Like what you knew, be prepared to assume like maybe it doesn't hold anymore. Change your own assumption. Like that's the skill set I think we need at the current day and age. And a lot of people are struggling with that, right? Like because of the, build a career on top of some of these practices, and like if this is completely reimagined stuff that we assume that's true might not be true anymore.
Yeah, definitely. But I think again, we both are data people, and so experiments prove these things rather than like my preference. Like, but then I would say from my principle sides, I'm thinking like, I love this Dijkstra quote. We've got it in the book, but it's like the purpose of abstracting is not to be vague, but to create a new semantic level in which one can be absolutely precise. And my problem with the Markdown piece is that we go the opposite direction. We become less precise than when you have a suite of tests and pieces. And so, yeah, Dean said, look, worth looking into. You continuously create specs to implement minor features, designed to be iterative with many small specs, not one large, maintains an audit trail like an ADR, but more detailed. Makes perfect sense. But I also think like ADRs should be executable. So you should be able to say, we prefer, say, for example, like Postgres over MySQL, right? That's your ADR. Like it's the, or the other way around, whichever. We don't choose. We're not saying which one you should use, but you can create a test that will make sure that no one in the ecosystem uses the wrong technology, right? And that you've got those things there, like that would actually be helpful. Now, it was way too much work to do that and very difficult to sort of write some of these things when it's a bit more of an abstract or less detailed spec. But like, yeah, you can now go to that level of specificity using AI and actually start to go, okay, cool. Well, like what would that architectural fitness function that is actually executable look like for that ADR? Like, can we go up that level? And that's a future I'm much more excited about than like you're going to be writing Markdown for the rest of your career.
Yeah. No, I agree, because this is this idea of being more precise. I think it's important, right? Because that's been the historical criticism of like, oh, architects can draw the boxes, like they can't write the code, and it's like there's argument about like actually the craft of software is always the design bit. You're making decisions about how to structure things to make sure it's malleable and it's maintainable and can evolve over time. So this idea of like, forcing us to be more precise of how we define this design architecture, like to your point, you can make it executable, then you can run it and you can get an output to say, yes, it's doing that or it's not doing that. Well, that's the role, like we are shifting towards engineers that have more of this kind of architects. And the agent can write the code, but like we need to see like how do we define whether the code is moving towards the direction that we want or not.
And do you know what if you shift that towards that direction as well, the other view is really that you're actually doing really good context engineering, because you're not providing the instructions necessarily up front if they are not relevant to the context. But if the agent strays and it gets caught by one of these fitness functions, it's getting feedback, whether it's via a linter or via a test, that says, hey, this is not how we do it. So you're not polluting the context with 200 pages of ADRs so that it doesn't know what the actual instructions are. But when it actually hits up against one of these barriers, it gets a just-in-time prompt that says, hey, go back that other way. And so again, like with these things, it's like, right, well, if you're taking that level of precision and putting it into a spec, why don't you then take that content and rather than leaving it as Markdown with a trail, which I think is a good way of doing it because it shows that history. So I will definitely look into this, Dean. But like, take that prompt that says go and do this, go in that direction, and add it to the test so that now whenever the agent trips it up, it doesn't just have like oh, we don't do that. It has a little bit of reasoning, a little bit of background, a little bit of examples of what to do next. Hey, like don't do this kind of. So I do this with mocking, and I'm like, hey, don't do this. Actually, this probably should be dependency injection. Do that, and then pass a mock to this rather than like mocking the whole thing. Create mock objects or just create a real object if it's doable, right? Like, and it's not going to have a lot of side effects, as it hopefully shouldn't. And you've got that like way of like now nudging, and building that harness over time, right? Yeah. And for me, I think that's a really good investment, and you over time get those sort of. There was a bunch of things we looked at last week, I think, around like the iterative improvement, right? And that's this like continuous improvement piece that makes you go faster and faster over time. There you go. Well, Dean,
we got a bit sidetracked on topic. Thanks, Dean.
Really sidetracked us there. We only got to like number 3. But yeah, like I like really interesting discussion. Well, let's jump back now to what we
The
were going to talk
last
about.
model release.
Yeah, which is another model release from Claude. Obviously expected after last week with Opus 4.6. You know, and again, shows like a great increase. Mostly they're focusing here on the computer use. So like quite interesting that's moving there. And yeah, I think this stuff looks pretty cool. So agentic coding comes very close to Opus 4.5. So, you know, actually, yeah, really strong and definitely like an improvement on Sonnet 4.5. Not massive, but again, like the improvements as you get closer to 100% become exponentially more difficult. So, yeah, like really good from this point of view. And yeah, office tasks and you know, improvements here. So some, you know, even though it's like the, I suppose, minor model to Opus, it's still showing some sort of state of the art results here in the financial analysis and office tasks and things. So pretty cool.
And it's cheaper as well, being the
yes.
Yeah. The other thing, the other one, they had a beta of like 1 million token context window with different pricing, by the way. So like if you choose to use 4 with more token context window, it's a little bit more expensive. But like, yeah, they are getting to the state of the art. So I guess Genai was the one that was, you know, a few models that would have 1 million context window. Now Anthropic is getting there as well. And Qwen also, right? Like 1 million tokens window if you look at the 3.5 release.
Yes. Yeah, and again, this is 1 million context window by default. So yeah, I mean, like these things again, the context window piece is just because of like quadratic expansion, right? You've basically got every token is like kind of refers to every other token. So like you increase, not even quadratic, like by a exponentially increasing costs and time of to sort of produce things by these context windows. But it's super useful to have these larger context windows. You know, for example, we're building an accelerator that looks at ontologies, and actually you're looking at relationships between concepts. So obviously having more concepts in the context allows much greater propagation of relationships, right? If I've got how many concepts in 100,000, right, I can only get relationships between those ones during that generation, and then I can't do that cross pollination. Whereas if I've got 1 million, I can have 10 times as many like entities, and actually within that, I can then also say, right, well, actually, you know, it's not just 10 times as many, it's like 100 or more times as many relationships, because each new concept can be linked to every other concept. So yeah, it's like it's a big thing to have a large context window like this as default. So yeah, really great from that. Just on time, I'll maybe move on to the next one, which is like a negative story about Anthropic, or maybe a positive one, depending on your viewpoint, for sure. But yeah, clashing with the Pentagon over AI usage. So obviously, so they were awarded a 200 million contract last year. The only AI company that's deployed its models on the agency's classified networks. Though I know that OpenAI also has a deal with the US government, right?
They just got one recently. Yeah, I mean, I think all of them now should have it.
Okay, cool. So
the clash here is about like they want the models to do or talk about topics that by default it's off limits, I guess, right? Because
so they didn't want to have
some of the guardrails.
So yeah, like something exactly, and then then the DoD is saying they're going to call it a supply chain risk. Like, so it all seems quite messy. You know, again, obviously, I don't think
threatening to kick them out, I guess, of that contract.
Yeah, makes sense. But again, like if if you're going to take a moral stance on using AI for defense, then you probably shouldn't sell to the Department of Defense. Like, I don't know. It's relatively straightforward for me. but I don't know. Like, yeah, like it's definitely messy waters that they sort of found themselves in. So yeah, for all lawful use cases without limitation. So interesting. Yeah, I'm no expert on the moral stance here, but yeah, for me, for sure, this is sort of, I found it easier to sort of avoid these kind of conflicts of interest. But maybe they're in that point where they can't, right? Because they just need more revenue, and this is an area for it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, last year we talked about they got the 30 billion round at 150 billion valuation. So definitely they need the money. Like training models is not cheap, and like we're doing bigger and bigger models. So yeah, who knows when it gets to the point where this becomes required.
Well, but yeah, and then I suppose it's the funding round, but it's the 200 million of proven revenue that allowed them to get the 300 billion of funding round with the valuation and that trajectory.
It's all linked.
It's an interesting one. And another one, another interesting piece of news here, and like quite exciting, I suppose, in terms of obviously loads of stuff around OpenClaw, both around it being sort of very much dangerous, but also super useful. And I think those things are related, right? The more, sharp tools tend to be very useful, but you can also really hurt yourself. So it's not always that you can take the the good without the bad. But yeah, looks like OpenAI are keen and have actually hired Peter Steinberger. So yeah, super interesting to see that they're like, yeah, this looks like the way to go. And that happened so quickly, right? Like this was launched. Yeah, this is like a month. This is, again, like that competition for talent, super interesting. Turns out if someone is like that visionary, then you can move heaven and earth and get hiring done really quickly. Okay, cool. Yeah.
So yeah, it's not like they acquired OpenClaw; they just hired the founder, but the project still remains an open source project.
So they've
obviously they might get less involved. I guess I don't know how much he will continue driving it.
So yeah, it's sponsoring it with strong commitments, but don't know what they are. So yeah, so that's quite interesting. But yeah, again, like a lot of the criticism of OpenClaw, aside from the security piece, has been like it's very developer focused, and it is, right. There's a lot of stuff you need to do to get things working, and like I'm not alone in with some of my colleagues where on a kind of air-gapped personal laptop, we've got some distance down the installation and said, this is giving me the heebie-jeebies. I don't like this, and stopped. So I do have a new phone number that I'm going to be using to set it up at some point, but I just need a little bit of time and to sort of air-gap it and stuff like that. And I think there's also I can't remember the name of the company, but there's always already been like companies launched that are basically saying we are going to be OpenClaw for the enterprise. So yeah, super interesting.
I mean, there's probably a ton of those.
Yeah, little more than slide decks and spreadsheets at this point, but I'm sure that they will soon become more real as we go from there. Cool. This was an interesting paper. MBR working paper. So there's articles around this that are maybe a bit more easily consumable, but oh god, thank you, Fortune. But yeah, so again, thousands of CEOs not seeing the impact on productivity yet, and again here 6,000 execs. So this is the actual paper, which is quite interesting. Survey 6,000 CFOs, CEOs, and executives. UK, US, Germany, Australia, 70% of them actively use AI, particularly younger, more productive firms. 2/3 regularly use. Their average is only 1.5 hours a week, with 1/4 reporting no AI use. And then little impact over the last 3 years, with over 80% of firms reporting no impact on either employment or productivity. And then they still predicting sizable impacts over the next 3 years. But actually, these seem very reasonable numbers, you know, and not anything like the sort of, you know, furor you might hear. But yeah, like for sure, I think there's this just, for me, I think we were talking about this very briefly just before the call. I kind of feel like this is a bit like the J curve, right? Where when you start using AI or start using anything, right, there's a period of adaptation that goes on, and there's a period of reimagining. And, you know, again, we've talked about this with enterprises, like the easiest automation sometimes is to stop doing things. And, you know, like if you automate something that shouldn't be done ever, then yeah, like of course you see no improvement in efficiency, because, you know, in fact, sometimes you might do the opposite, right? Where if you now automate something that's, you know, has a negative impact on productivity, now it might happen much more and have a much larger negative impact on productivity. So, you know, navigating those things for large enterprises is really challenging, you know, and it's not just a technological problem, it's a socio-technical problem. You know, it's something that you need to look at your processes and how you do work. I mean, we've talked about this a lot tonight. What are your thoughts?
100%. I mean, this is one more data point, I guess, and I've been tracking studies like this. Yeah, I think productivity, especially individual productivity, is the wrong metric to try to optimize, because if we think we just give access to these models to people, they use to do whatever they already do, yeah, you will get like an hour a week. Like I saw a study from DX on like use of AI for coding, and like I think the average is like 3.4 hours a week, so like slightly more, maybe 9%, or not as low as this one. I saw a study from the UK government rolling out Copilot across a bunch of the departments, and like they're finding savings of 20 minutes a day, which is like 5% as well. So like you see this incremental productivity, but like how does that get captured in the bigger piece from a CEO perspective? It's like, yeah, people are using it to write emails, summarize documents, or draft things. But like we talked about it, like it takes a bit of time. You might actually start doing something else, and then there's context switching. So individual productivity as a metric, yes, you can do tests faster. You can maybe produce more things. Like systemically capture that, and it always comes back to like systems thinking, right? Like the bottleneck to shift elsewhere. It's like, yeah, the agents can write code faster. It's like, no, okay, have review. We're talking about putting all the harness around either before or after to make sure things are shipped. So do you actually get more features getting shipped to production? I think is the people really leaning in are probably seeing more of these game-changing things, because they are reimagining the whole process, not just apply AI to an existing process or to existing people and expect that you get the outside stuff. And you see that is a topic, right? They launched Cowork. They said it was built in 10 days as a new product to market. I'm sure they are full-on AI enabled across the whole product's life cycle. Yeah, there was a Q4 report from DX talking about some of these findings, because they have access to metrics, right? A lot of people, developer experience. So yeah, there's a few different such reports. So it's good that this one is the latest one, and the numbers are even lower than what I've been tracking. But the phenomena, I think, doesn't surprise me. To really capture more game-changing value, one is like think about how much more output you could do, and like how do you capitalize on that? Like what's the value of being able to do more work? And also think of it more systemically as a manager, as a leader. The bottleneck's going to shift elsewhere, and it's your job to figure out where that is, and like how do you fix the constraint, right? It's always like you make something that's not a constraint faster, you just make the bigger problem worse, because you're piling up inventory somewhere else in the value stream.
Yeah, exactly that. And yeah, you're taking resources away from other pieces of work that may be more valuable, right? So, you know, again, it's also product, right? Where if you're building a product that nobody wants or uses or needs, then, you know, yeah, like doesn't matter how fast like how many lines of code. Obviously, that's a clearly terrible like use of like quality, but like it doesn't matter how many you do. Every one you do is a complete waste of time. So, you know, again, like working on that piece of like, what should we build? How should we build it? Like, you know, that sort of stuff works. And again, like I said, I think that's why I like the approach of building these things into tools and tests, is because rather that, you know, then you're sharing that like learnt experience. You can debate something, whether this adds or detracts, and you know, you can actually like start building that harness so that, you know, now other people can get the benefit of that reliability, that increased you know, that increased efficiency. But yeah, I think this is super interesting, and O'Reilly have commented on it as well. So Mike here, so yeah, like he feels like, yeah, every developer will increasingly operate as a lead for a team of AI agents. Commenting on the DX.
That was an interesting one that I was sending you as well. Another take on this, as we're getting close to time, but like Steve Yegi published an article this week on the idea of like the AI vampire, which is about like, yeah, these tools are making us produce a lot more and like making us get the outsized outputs, but like who's capturing the value? Because one of the personal things that we're feeling, like I felt a bit of that as well, but like because you can do more, you come down to like, okay, what else do I need to do? What else do I need to do? Like it's a bit of like mental health side, I guess, as like, do we just take that like, okay, I've done the same thing I used to do, take me a week, and now I can do something else? But no, humans are like, oh, now I want to do the next thing, and now I want to do the next thing, and it's like it keeps sucking that productivity out of you. Then it becomes the next expectation, I guess. And obviously, companies will always take that on their side. So yeah, if I can squeeze more productivity out of my employees, that's good. But like he's arguing here, like he's felt similar things, but he's like, the answer should be somewhere in the middle, right? Like we should obviously capture some of that for the bigger benefit of the company, and like they take that also as a person, like they get exhausted, right? Like
yeah. No, I agree, and like, yeah, like for sure, I sort of get a little bit of this. Yeah, there's a little bit like for Claude Code, without doing some of those things, there's a little bit of that, like, you know, pull the lever and like see what comes out the other side, right? You know, but yeah, there's always going to be this tension. Yeah, there's always going to be this tension between companies trying to capture as much value as they can and people trying to rightfully capture as much as they can value as they can. Yeah, I mean, like, I think it's interesting. Like, and I was watching the All In podcast. They were talking about like, there's this point where like, okay, cool. Well, like, does token usage and cost, when does that get close to or surpass salaries, right? And so, you know, like, how much are you? Yeah. Okay, cool. So like, there you go. Whole company is 3+ max for Gastown, 22 accounts, 4,400 a month. You know, so like he's spending that's like more than a lot of people's salaries, right? This chap seems to be spending this much per month on Gastown and Claude Code. And my experience with Gastown was, yes, it really does burn through token. Maybe it's worth it because he gets things done, but like, this is interesting, like who captures that value. And yeah, like I think a lot of these things, yeah, like will fail for sure. So it's super interesting approach. Definitely, like, would recommend people have a little read of that, because yeah, I find it interesting. Like, however, having said that, what was the other article that went? We're almost at time now, but there was another article about like something big is happening. I think we talked about it like 2 weeks ago, a week ago.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the other way around.
Right? It came out last week.
Yeah, and it's kind of the other way around, which is basically like there's this career advantage for those who are early adopters, and you know, can capture those productivity gains themselves. And that's kind of where I see that sort of, you know, to some degree, you know, you have to be selfish in this way and start to like focus on your own skills and your own employability. And so I think that like working on these bits and pieces is like gonna pay off. But again, like if you're doing that at the cost of your mental health, that's a really bad exchange, because it's much more difficult to recover that from
Yeah.
burnout and all these other bits and pieces than it is from like not getting promoted as quickly as you maybe could be. Like,
We should definitely
doesn't
look
hit
out
in the same way.
ourselves. Don't get stuck in.
No, indeed. Cool. I think we pretty much covered everything we wanted to, right? Yeah. Okay.
Weird, yeah.
Yeah, we bit of a rush at the end there. And yeah, thanks again to Sam, Dean, and Rishi for commenting. Yeah, it really helps. It's really interesting when we go down these rabbit holes of sort of what people have seen as well. But yeah,
one idea I have on the thread, once it's published, some of the links that we've been discussing, we can start posting as comments, so people that either watching it afterwards or are interested in some of the things we're talking about and you want to read it, you can reference that. So we'll try to get to, I guess, compiling those.
You know what? I probably should
notes.
post them as we go, shouldn't I? Really? Then that would save a lot of effort at the end. So maybe I'll do that.
Yes.
Maybe I'll do that from now on. Awesome.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Nice. Last one from Dean. Challenges of cost of tokens. Unlikely to say the same. Yep. Yeah, they may go down though. They have been historically going down. And then again, if you're talking local, then you're just talking power. So it's
the push to commoditization always drives the cost down. So like if you assume models will be commodities, then you'll keep going down. But like the overall few ones try to keep the price up. Like that's just a natural economic cycle of how this thing works.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, well, thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Definitely.
See you.
Bye.
Cheers.